My name is Sarah Kowalski, and I'm 35 years old. As I adjusted my dress uniform in the Pentagon parking garage, my hands trembled slightly. Not from nerves about the classified briefing I was about to give, but from the text message I'd just received. Can't wait to see you at the reunion tomorrow. Still can't believe little Sarah is playing soldier. When are you coming home to get a real job? I wasn't the girl anyone expected to make it in the military. I was 5 feet 2 inches, barely 110 pounds, and spent more time in the library than the gym. When I told my family I was enlisting, my father actually chuckled. Honey, basic training will break you in half. But tomorrow, at my 17-year high school reunion, they'd meet Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kowalski, the intelligence officer whose reports shape national security decisions. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, if you have ever been underestimated by family, this story will show you exactly how sweet vindication can taste. Because the quiet girl in the back of the class became the person senior military leaders turned to for answers. I grew up in small-town Pennsylvania, the kind of place where your future is decided by your high school performance. My father worked at the local steel mill, my mother taught elementary school. We were solidly middle class with traditional expectations. I was always the smallest kid in class. While other girls played sports or socialized, I buried myself in books. History, strategy games, puzzles. My teachers called me gifted. My classmates called me weird. When I was 16, I watched a documentary about military intelligence analysts. These were people who connected dots others couldn't see, who prevented attacks before they happened, who used their minds to protect people. I was fascinated. I started researching military careers obsessively. Not combat roles, but analytical positions. Intelligence officer. Strategic planning. Fields where being small and quiet could actually be advantages. The night I told my parents I wanted to join the army after graduation, the kitchen fell silent. My father set down his coffee mug. Sarah, honey, you weigh 110 pounds soaking wet. They'll eat you alive. Dad, it's not all about physical strength anymore, I tried to explain. There are intelligence roles, analytical positions. My mother shook her head. Sweetie, the military is for different types of people. Rough people. You're gentle. You're meant for college, maybe teaching like me. My brother Jake, home from college football, actually laughed. Sarah, they're going to make you crawl under barbed wire and do 100 push-ups. You can't even open a pickle jar. I want to work in intelligence, I insisted. Analyzing threats, understanding enemy capabilities, providing strategic assessments. My family exchanged those looks. The kind that said, she's living in a fantasy world. Sarah, my mother said gently, why don't you apply to Penn State like we discussed? Something stable. But I'd already made up my mind. My high school graduation was awkward. While classmates talked about college plans, I sat quietly knowing I'd report to Fort Leonard Wood in 3 weeks for basic combat training. Even the day I left, my parents made one last attempt. It's not too late, my mother said at the bus station. We could call the recruiter, explain that you've changed your mind. The recruiter said most girls don't make it through the first month, my father added. No shame in coming home, sweetheart. I looked at their worried faces, at Jake shaking his head, at the doubt in their eyes. I'm going to be fine, I said. More than fine. As that bus pulled away from everything familiar, heading toward Fort Leonard Wood and a future none of them believed I could handle, I'll admit I had moments of doubt. What if they were right? What if I was too small, too weak, too sheltered? What I didn't know then was that the Army needed analysts who could process massive amounts of data. Strategists who could think 3 moves ahead. Intelligence officers who could see patterns others missed. They needed minds like mine. Basic combat training at Fort Leonard Wood was everything I feared and nothing like my family expected. The first week, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Drill sergeant screaming inches from my face, physical training at 5 a.m., learning to disassemble weapons I'd never touched before. My hands shook the first time I held the service rifle. But something clicked during tactical exercises. While other recruits focused on meeting physical standards, I found myself drawn to the strategy sessions. The problem-solving under pressure. During one particularly challenging scenario, I identified a solution that had escaped everyone else. My drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Martinez, pulled me aside afterward. "Kowalski, you see things others miss. You thinking about intelligence?" "Yes, drill sergeant. That's my goal." He nodded approvingly. "Good. Army needs soldiers who can think 3 moves ahead." After basic, I was sent to Fort Huachuca for military intelligence training. For the first time in my life, being quiet and observant weren't weaknesses, they were my greatest assets. I excelled in signals analysis, threat assessment, strategic planning. Everything my mind had been preparing for without me realizing it. My first assignment was Fort Gordon, Georgia, as a junior analyst. Within 3 years, I was leading a team. By year 8, I'd earned my commission as an officer through a combination of performance and completing my degree. But the hardest part wasn't the training or the responsibility, it was the growing distance from home. The breaking point came during my 8th year of service. I was a captain then, having just received recognition for work that prevented a significant cyber attack. My commanding officer called it exceptional service that protected critical infrastructure. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt hollow. I called home to share the news, thinking maybe this time they'd understand the weight of what I did. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, her attention clearly elsewhere. "Listen, Jake just got engaged to that lawyer I told you about. We're planning the engagement party next month. The whole family will be there. Can you get leave? It would mean so much to finally have something real to celebrate as a family." Something real to celebrate. I hung up and sat in my quarters, staring at the commendation in my hands. I was briefing colonels, my threat assessments were shaping military strategy, I'd just helped prevent an attack that could have crippled infrastructure. But to them, none of it was real. For weeks afterward, I questioned everything. What was the point of achieving so much if the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally couldn't even see it? Maybe they were right. Maybe I was wasting my potential on something they'd never understand or value. I considered getting out. Going home. Following the path they'd always wanted for me. But then I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't doing this for them anymore. I was doing this because when I analyzed a threat and briefed senior leadership, I knew my work mattered. Because when junior officers came to me for guidance, I could help them grow. Because this was who I was meant to be. That night, I stopped trying to earn their approval and started living entirely for my own. After that turning point, everything changed. I threw myself into my career with new purpose. I specialized in cyber threat analysis and strategic intelligence assessment, earned my master's in international relations, and focused on becoming the best officer I could be. Each promotion brought new responsibilities. First lieutenant. Captain. Major. By year 13, I was promoted to lieutenant colonel, briefing higher-level officials, analyzing complex threats, making recommendations that affected national security policy. By year 15, I was selected for the Army War College. By year 17, I'd been assigned to a senior intelligence position at the Pentagon. At 35, I was among the younger lieutenant colonels in military intelligence. But to my hometown, I was still just Sarah, playing soldier. That was about to change. The drive from the Pentagon to my hometown took 3 hours. 3 hours to decide whether I should wear my uniform or civilian clothes. I chose civilian clothes. Let them think I was still the same unremarkable Sarah who'd disappointed them all those years ago. The reunion was held at our old high school gymnasium. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, looking like any other 30-something woman returning to reminisce about the past. "Sarah. Oh my God, is that really you?" Jessica rushed over, practically bouncing with excitement. You made it. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I mean, with your military schedule and all. I had some leave saved up, I said simply. As we walked through the crowd, I saw my former classmates clustered in the same social groups they'd formed in high school. The jocks talked about coaching jobs and beer league softball. The popular girls compared photos of their children and vacation homes. And then I heard it. Is that Sarah Kowalski? Wow, she actually showed up. I heard she's still in the army. Can you believe it? 17 years of that. She probably couldn't find anything better. I mean, what skills does the military really give you? I pretended not to hear them, but Jessica caught the comments too. Ignore them, she whispered. They're just jealous they don't have your sense of adventure. Adventure. That's what she called it. Like I'd been on some extended camping trip instead of building a career that affected national security. The evening progressed with the usual reunion activities. People shared updates about their lives and tried to relive their glory days. I mostly listened, offering polite responses when asked about my military experience. So Sarah, called out Mike Thompson, one of the former football players who'd mocked my enlistment. Still playing soldier? When are you going to get a real career? He turned to the others and smirked. 17 years in uniform and nothing to show for it but some vacation days and sore knees? A few people laughed under their breath. The conversation around us quieted. Before I could respond, a familiar voice interrupted from behind me. Excuse me, are you Sarah Kowalski? I turned to see Mr. Peterson, my old history teacher, approaching with a warm smile. I thought that was you. My nephew works at the Pentagon in the communications division. He mentioned seeing Lieutenant Colonel Kowalski in the hallways and said she was from our high school. He was so impressed when he looked you up. That's you, isn't it? The conversation around us had stopped completely. Mike Thompson looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Lieutenant Colonel, Mr. Peterson continued, beaming with pride. Sarah, that's extraordinary. Do you know how rare it is to reach that rank, especially at your age? My nephew said you briefed some very senior people. I could feel the shift in the room. The way people were looking at me differently, recalibrating everything they thought they knew about quiet Sarah Kowalski. It's been a good career, I said simply. Mr. Peterson turned to address the small crowd that had gathered. Folks, we have genuine military leadership right here. Lieutenant Colonel is one of the senior officer ranks. Sarah's probably responsible for intelligence that affects national security. The silence was deafening. Jessica was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. Sarah, why didn't you ever tell me? I mean, I knew you were in the army, but I had no idea you were so accomplished. You never asked what I actually did, I said gently. Most people hear military and think they already know. Mike Thompson, who'd been making jokes about my career 5 minutes earlier, was studying his drink like it contained the secrets of the universe. Just then, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name that carried far more weight than anyone in this gym, Colonel Martinez. Excuse me, I said, stepping away. I need to take this. Out in the hallway, the noise of reunion chatter faded behind me. Kowalski here. Lieutenant Colonel, sorry to call during leave, but we've got a developing situation. Intelligence flagged a priority target. We need your eyes on it before the Monday morning brief. How urgent? Urgent enough. I need you at a secure facility. Carlisle Barracks is closest to your current location. I can be there in 30 minutes. I walked back in only long enough to find Jessica. Work emergency, I said. The whispers began before I even reached the parking lot. Jessica walked me to my car, still looking stunned by the evening's revelations. Listen, I barely got to really talk to you tonight with all the chaos. Would it be weird if I stopped by your parents' house tomorrow? I'd love to catch up properly. And honestly, I want to see your mom and dad again. I haven't seen them in years. Sure, they'd love that. They're usually home Sunday mornings. Perfect. Maybe then you can tell me what you actually do. Because clearly I've been completely clueless. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house for what I knew would be our first honest conversation in 17 years. Jessica's car was already in the driveway. She'd beaten me there. I could hear voices from the kitchen as I approached the front door. My father's deep baritone, my mother's higher pitch, and Jake's familiar laugh. But there was something different in their tone. Something I hadn't heard in years when they talked about me. Respect. I knocked and walked in, the way I had 1,000 times growing up. Sarah. My mother appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of confusion and something that looked almost like awe. Jessica's been telling us the most incredible things. Jessica stood up from the kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, looking slightly embarrassed. I hope you don't mind. I just couldn't help myself. Your parents had no idea what you'd accomplished. My father emerged from behind his newspaper, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. Lieutenant Colonel? Sarah, is this true? I nodded. Yes, Dad. It's true. But you never. My mother started, then stopped. All these years, when you called home, you never mentioned. You never asked, I said gently. When I tried to explain my promotions, you'd change the subject to Jake's job or ask when I was coming home for good. Jake appeared in the doorway, still looking stunned. Sis, Jessica says you brief senior military leadership. Yes. Sometimes generals, sometimes Pentagon officials. My father sat heavily in his chair. All this time, we thought you were we didn't understand. Lieutenant Colonel is like being a senior director at a major corporation, Jessica interjected. It's one of the higher officer ranks. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God. Sarah, we've been treating you like your career didn't matter. It didn't matter to you, I said, keeping my voice steady. It mattered to me. It mattered to the soldiers I've led, the threats I've helped neutralize, the operations I've supported. An uncomfortable silence settled over the kitchen. Finally, my father spoke. Sarah, I owe you an apology. A big one. I was wrong about everything. About the military, about your potential, about what you could achieve. My mother nodded, tears starting to form. We're so proud of you. We should have been proud all along. We just didn't understand, Jake added quietly. I looked at my family, these people who had shaped me through their doubt and dismissal, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not anger anymore. Not hurt. Something closer to peace. I know you didn't understand, I said quietly. For years, that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But somewhere along the way, I learned that my worth isn't determined by whether you see it or not. My father's eyes were watery when he looked up at me. When you enlisted, I was terrified. Not because I thought you'd fail, but because I didn't understand a world where my little girl would be in danger. It was easier to dismiss it than to face how scared I was for you. And I was scared too, my mother added. The military seemed so foreign, so far from anything we knew. When you tried to explain your work, it sounded like something from a movie. Jake had been quiet through this exchange, but now he spoke up. Can I say something? Growing up, I always thought I was the successful one because I followed the traditional path. College, job, promotion, house. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But you knew what you wanted and went after it, even when all of us told you it was wrong. You built something incredible. You've been braver than any of us. For the first time in 17 years, I felt like I had my family back. That afternoon, we talked for hours. Really talked. About my work, my life, the person I'd become. They asked questions they should have asked years ago, and I answered them honestly. It wasn't perfect. 17 years of misunderstanding couldn't be erased in one conversation. But it was a beginning. 3 months later, I received a package at my home address. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping from the local Pennsylvania paper, Hometown Hero, Local Woman Rises to Lieutenant Colonel in Army Intelligence. The article featured quotes from my high school reunion and interviews with my family. My mother was quoted saying, "We always knew Sarah was special, but we didn't understand how special until now." I smiled, shaking my head. Typical mom, rewriting history to make herself look better. But what struck me was a separate handwritten note from my father. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said about knowing who you are with or without our approval. I realize now that's exactly the kind of strength the military saw in you that we completely missed. I'm sorry it took us so long to catch up. We're proud of the woman you became, not because of your rank, but because of who you are. Love, Dad." I kept that note on my desk, not because I needed their validation anymore, but because it reminded me of something important: the right people will eventually see your worth. And the ones who don't? Their opinion was never the measure of your success anyway. The truth is, I didn't need that reunion to prove anything. I didn't need my family's apology to feel complete. I'd already learned the most important lesson years earlier: your worth isn't determined by whether others recognize it. But there's something powerful about watching people realize they underestimated you. Not for revenge, but for the simple satisfaction of knowing you were right about yourself all along. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you weren't enough, remember this: your validation doesn't come from other people finally seeing your achievements. It comes from you recognizing your own worth and pursuing your path regardless of who believes in you. The quiet girl in the back of the class became the person senior military leaders turned to for answers. Not because anyone expected it, but because she knew it was possible. If this story resonated with you, like and subscribe for more stories about rising above those who underestimate you. Share your own experience in the comments. Have you ever had to prove wrong the people who should have believed in you from the start? And remember, never let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big for who they think you are. Trust your journey. The right people will catch up eventually. Until next time, stay true to your path.